You're listening to Reach, Teach, Talk with Nat Dane.
Welcome back to another episode of Reach, Teach, Talk. I'm thrilled because our guest today, Craig Wilkinson, is coming from Johannesburg, South Africa. Sun is setting over there while the sun is rising over here in Los Angeles. I just think that the optics are really neat. It's kind of cool that we live in an age where technology is connecting us. And certainly we have seen in the past couple of years during the pandemic, the use of, in our format, Zoom, and learning and bringing people together around the world. And when we talk about the now normal, as opposed to the new normal or just the normal, we're talking about a usage of technology and capitalizing on what we've all pivoted in the past couple of years to adapt to, which is this platform and this format that, again, enables Craig and I to talk today and in a way that is simple and seamless. And anyway, I'm just grateful for that aspect of the time that we live in today. Craig Wilkinson grew up in Johannesburg, and he is, again, like I said, he is coming from Johannesburg today. And he's a social entrepreneur doing great things with his profit, Father a Nation. We're going to talk today on the definition of masculinity and what it is to be a man in today's world and looking forward. There's been a lot of studies that are just coming out right now about boys and young men and how they have weathered through the pandemic in uniquely different ways than girls have. And we're certainly looking at an age where terms like toxic masculinity and others have kind of impacted the way that young men feel about themselves. Craig will share some of his own research and studies about how boys and young men are perceiving themselves as men today and how we can really capitalize on the positive elements of being a man without focusing on the heaviness of that term, be a man. So without much further ado, Craig, welcome to Reach, Teach, Talk. We're thrilled to have you here with us today.
Thanks, Nat. Great to be with you, and awesome to be across the globe. Sharing across the pond.
It truly is across the globe.
Are the same. Humanity's the same.
I'm sorry. Say again.
I was just saying, the principles across the world are the same. The cultural, demonstration of it may differ slightly, but the principles and the fundamentals are the same throughout the world. Humanity is humanity.
Humanity is humanity. Let's start from there, actually. When it comes to the idea of the male element of being human, what is your definition of masculinity? What is it about being a man that is unique?
Well, I mean, that's a massive question, and it's a fairly fluid question in some ways, but in other ways, it's not fluid. I always like to come from the standpoint, particularly in today's age, that true, authentic masculinity is a beautiful, powerful, wonderful gift to the world. We've got to start from that standpoint, as is femininity. These are gifts to the world. I mean, in recent times, I've really felt the need to emphasize, human first. We're so polarized. I look at American politics, I look at what's happening in South Africa, across the world. We're so polarized, into these different categories and groups. And if we could just say, well, you know what, before anything else, before I'm a man, before I'm a South African, before I'm white, before I'm a Christian or an atheist or whatever I might happen to be, I'm a human being. And that's my fundamental identity. And that's the most important thing that makes me who I am. When you look at masculinity, as I said, it's a beautiful gift to humanity. And there's so much demonization of masculinity at the moment. As you mentioned earlier, the word toxic masculinity. But, I've written a little booklet called The Six Pack of Masculine Virtues. Playing on the word the six pack, that you can drink the six pack of your stomach. But more important than that, it's the virtues that you play out and live out as a man. And we can run through those briefly if you'd like. But I don't think you can have one definite. This is what masculinity is. I think it encompasses a lot. There's also beautiful archetypes of masculinity. You've probably studied the king, the warrior, the lover, the friend. These are different masculine archetypes that have come through the years. And again, there's such value in all of those. And I think today, men need to have multiple facets to who they are. There's a time when you need to be the king. You know your domain. You're an expert in your domain. You manage it well. Good kings don't dominate. Good kings serve. So there's the servant leadership. So king doesn't have the negative connotation of I'm ruling with an iron scepter and do as I say, or else. That's not a king. A king creates an atmosphere in which everyone in the kingdom can flourish and thrive and become their best, and that's what king is. warrior too. We need to be warriors at times. Life is brutal, Nat, isn't it? I mean, life is not a bed of roses. Unemployment, sickness, pandemics. These things come. And at times when things are tough, you need to have the warrior face. You need to put on the face and fight this thing through. The friend, there are times when you need to listen and hear and be soft and gentle and give your time, and the lover. Love is not just a sexual thing. Lover is an intimate, gentle, caring, listening, nurturing, serving. So these are the facets of masculinity which we all need to have. And I think one of the problems we have is we typecast it as this or that, just as we polarize. I'm rambling a bit.
No, you're not rambling whatsoever. This is amazing. I'd love for you to break down the six pack as well in just a moment, but I'm curious about this talk about why it is that society today seems to be playing off the negative images of masculinity, the negative stereotypes, and instead of cultivating and nurturing more positive definitions.
Well, the reality of our history, I like to look at, if you look at the history of masculinity, you can really talk about 5 streams. Historically, 2 are very good, 2 can be quite negative, and 3 are very good. So I mean, historically, men have laid down their lives for their countries and for their families. I mean, you look at the amount of men killed in World War II. Now, I'm not a proponent of war, but I am totally sympathetic to a just war. To when a bully comes into your house, you can't just let that bully override. You need to fight back. I mean, you look at what's happening in Russia and Ukraine at the moment. If bullies, we'll look at the second one. Look at Nazi Germany. If the Allied forces didn't get together and resist that evil, what kind of world would we live in today? So there has to be. So men have laid down their lives throughout history. If you look at that, you look at 9/11. 331st responders died in 9/11. 300 of those were men. So it's very often the men charging into danger, laying down their lives, and they're doing this selflessly for other people. So there's that aspect of the history of masculinity. If you look at the second aspect, is men, the dirty jobs. You look at, I guarantee, the house that you live in, the buildings you enter, the oil that you put into your vehicle, whether your politics are around renewable energy, that was extracted by men, built by men. The vast majority of bricklayers and oil workers and men. So men do the dirty, hard jobs. And we've got to give accolades for this. There's a heroism, there's a but then men have abused power. So you look at how many, the casting couch. I mean, we've seen recently the Epsteins and tragically the Bill Cosby. We all thought this was. So men have abused their power as well historically. They've had positions of power and they've abused that. They've also treated women as objects. We go back to that. So those 2 elements are negative. But you look at the history of men and women together. I mean, all of our history, men and women have lived together in harmony, cooperation, creating families, creating children, raising those families, doing whatever they need to do. There's been a tremendous partnership and harmonious. So what's fascinating about the social media era is that, you often hit the 5% or the 2%, the vocal, angry people setting the agenda, don't you, for the rest. And I think the vast majority of people love men and love women and love the dance between the genders. I mean, think about it. You and I exist today because many years back, a mom and a dad got together and they co-created you and I. I think the world continues to function well when men and women continue this creative dance, in every aspect. But because there has been abuse and because there's been a shifting of roles, we've moved from very much a manufacturing, physical type economy into an information-based economy and service-based economy, where physical strength is not an issue anymore. It's intellectual strength. And men and women, the real research is very clear on this. Men and women, in terms of intellect, are pretty much on average the same. There's slight differences in terms of spatial perception, etc. But so it's moved into that economy. So I think the negativity has come around a backlash from where there has been abuse. But you can't say that abuse has been the vast majority. Now, the vast majority of families don't have an abusive, tyrannical father and husband, beating up on his wife, and that's not. But because that has been the case, there's been a backlash against that in the back, and I think the narrative. In many ways, many of the narratives that are out there through social media are quite distorted and quite damaging. So I think we need to really return to a picture of men are good, fundamentally, no boy is born an abuser. No boy is born a racist. No boy is born, any of these things. Something happens on the journey from baby to boy, from boy to man. And I think one of the key contributors to that is the breakup of households, the breakup of the family. The absence of fathers in the household is a crucial causative effect of why men have gone so wrong, and why there's confusion around masculinity. The fathers are not present. Young boys look to older men to model masculinity to them. A mother cannot model what it means to be a man to her boy. She can model what it means to be a woman to her daughter, but she can't model because she isn't a man. A father needs to do that. So young boys look to older men to model masculinity to them. And in the absence of a father, uncle, close, intimate, mentor or stepfather can also do that. Where do they look? They're confused. They look to rap stars and, often the wrong models of what it means to be a man.
Your work with Father Our Nation, this segues beautifully into your nonprofit. Can you share for the audience here kind of what the mission is behind Father Our Nation and how it dovetails with what you were just sharing about the absence of fathers and that impact on healthy masculinity development?
Yeah, thanks, Nat. I mean, look, South Africa is a very wounded society. As you know, our history is one of apartheid and breaking up of families and violence. And so we have a very, very high incidence of fatherlessness here. I mean, in some communities, up to 70% of kids are growing up without a father present and engaged. And we see that working out in society. We have probably the world's highest incidence of gender-based violence, violence against women and children. And the correlation between the two is just irrefutable. So I started Father Our Nation 10 years back with the belief and the view that if we can heal men, we can heal the world. I totally believe that. Broken men are very dangerous. They're dangerous to themselves. The suicide rate amongst men is 4 times higher than that of women, and that's pretty across the globe. Very slightly, because men, when a man decides to do himself in, he does himself in generally. And when a man is broken, wounded, a distorted notion of what it means to be a man, he's a destructive person, both to himself and those around him. So Father Nation was really, if we can refather our nation, if we can refather men who've grown up unfathered, restore those men, heal the woundedness in them from a lack of father and restore into them a good understanding of what it means to be a man. And that's where the six-pack emerged. We can heal families, communities, societies, our nation, and by extension, the world, And I think this applies across the globe.
Can you share a bit about the impact of isolation on male kind of male mental health, right? Because I'm thinking about this in a sense of two things. One, I'm thinking about just the whole being brought up to be that rugged individual, right? I can do this alone. I'm a man. Kind of these traits that positively are emulated and have been for a long time, this as a definition of masculinity, the rugged individual. And then I'm also thinking about isolation in terms of the past couple of years with the pandemic. And when I'm thinking about boys and young men and how they have been growing up during times of lockdown, during times of forced isolation, and just what have you discerned in terms of the connection between isolation and masculinity and how that pertains to kind of what Father Nation is looking to heal?
Right. Yeah, it's a very deep and complex question. And, what I will share now is anecdotal. It's not scientifically researched at all. I don't think we've had the time frame necessary to research this, the full impact of lockdown. Look, lockdown has affected men and women deeply, human beings. There was a beautiful story, a touching story from Canada of this big, rough, bearded, blue-collar worker man who was getting some lunch in a store, and he'd forgotten to put his mask on. You may have seen the clip. And a little 5-year-old girl came up to him and said to him, "You've got such a beautiful face," And this guy, this big blue guy, actually broke down in tears, and he realized, he in his view, he doesn't know, he's got a big bearded face. But the point is, this little girl hadn't seen a strange face. She'd just seen a mask, and she was just missing. Any face she saw was beautiful. And I think lockdown has had a huge impact on disconnectedness. And I think it varies at different ages. Young kids growing up are not learning facial cues, are they? Micro expressions and stuff. But I think in terms of masculinity, men, particularly boys growing up, need the rough and tumble. They need the outdoors. They need the contact. If you look at the way a boy reacts with his dad, very different to the way a daughter does. I mean, my son used to come running down the driveway and tackle me. When I'd come home, and there was fighting and roughing and tumbling. And I think that the sport and is crucial for men. It's a way it's a way, if you look in the wild, it's a way animals rough and tumble to learn how to control their strength and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And I think a lack of that is very destructive in boys. We'd seen a trend in this too with social media and boys not being outdoors anymore, being indoors and living their lives virtually through, games and gaming, and that's, there's a place for that, but I think it's destructive if that's all that they do. I think every boy needs to get out there and do not necessarily only sport, but sport, hiking, nature, that kind of stuff. And when you rob a boy of that, I think it does have an impact on their psychological, emotional, and physical development. And I think we're definitely seeing that. I mean, aggression comes out then in other forms. You need positive, good, healthy outlets for aggression to be controlled in the right kind of way. And without those, it tends to surface in other ways. Addictions, pornography has become a massive thing. I mean, these kinds of addictions that boys are moving into, as opposed to having a healthy outlet for it.
I'm looking at the headlines in the papers or on news sites about the metaverse, and we are on the cusp of a whole new kind of foray into technology. And it's interesting because I'm thinking about how we began this conversation where I was celebrating and praising the pixels that bring us together from 8,000 miles away. Yet at the same time, those pixels can never quite replicate the actual experience of being outdoors. Like the different areas of the brain fire up when you're wearing a VR, glasses, and you're looking at nature, and you're absolutely convincing yourself that you're in nature as you're walking through in this metaverse environment, but you're not. Your brain is not. It knows the difference, and we'll never. I mean, who knows? But certainly, we have not been able to replicate the actual real life experience through the screen in terms of being able to fool our brains. And if you can't fool your brain, then you're not going to be able to fool you're not fooling yourself. So I was just thinking about that as you were talking, Craig, about the need for being outdoors, the need for the rough and tumble. And I'm actually quite intrigued by what you just said also about in the rough and tumble. It's not so much about the aggression. It is about the aggression and showing your strength. But it's also about restraint. It's learning how to pull back. And I'm thinking about dogs now, like two puppies going, wrestling each other, and how their teeth will bite into the neck of the other, but not too hard. It's almost like they're testing it. And I don't see much of a difference between boys as well.
No, it's the same thing. It's crucial. I think about my son. He's now 28 years old. But when Luke turned 11, I said to him, Luke, what do you want to do for your birthday? I said, you can do anything you want, as long as it's not too expensive, you can do, So he writes this list, Nat, and it was just such a, it just was beautiful. The list was this: he wanted to invite all his friends around, and they wanted to wrestle me, their dad. I thought, I'm in for a great weekend, So number one. Number two, they wanted to play some rugby, rugby. I know you've got it. Number three, they wanted to have an arm wrestling competition. My son. Number four, they wanted to have some fireworks. But he said, Dad, I don't want to just light the firecrackers. He said, can we blow something up, please? This is his wish list. Then they wanted to have a cookout, and then they wanted to play PlayStation the whole night through. And we did it. We did that whole thing. And I don't know, there must have been 15 kids. I had a bruised stomach the next day. But you could literally smell the testosterone. It was just this, but it was so beautiful because it was young boys putting themselves against the older bull and learning what to do and what not to do. And they wanted to blow something up. But, if you don't have an older man directing how you can blow things up in a safe fashion, what are they going to do? They're going to blow things up in an unsafe fashion. If you don't have that controlled aggression, what's going to happen? Guns are going to come out, fighting's going to, inappropriate expressions of it. So it's so crucial that we have this, and I am concerned, like anything, technology is a tool that can be used for fantastic good, but it can also be used very badly. I often use the analogy of a car, a motor vehicle. A motor vehicle is a beautiful thing. We all use them every single day, or virtually, but they can also be dangerous. Tens of thousands of people are killed every year on our roads. So a motor vehicle is a powerful tool for good, but a destructive tool for bad in the wrong hands. And in order to learn how to drive a motor vehicle, you need someone who's driven a motor vehicle to teach you. You can't do a YouTube clip on how to drive. You need an instructor there. And that instructor has to know how to, and masculinity is the same thing. You need, it's a destructive force for bad, but it's a beautiful force for good if driven properly. And you need a man who knows how to drive his masculinity to teach young boys how to do it. And you're not going to find that in the metaverse. It's all virtual.
Craig, that's really, really well said. And I'm thinking about a program that I run in the summer in Los Angeles here called Reach Academy for Young Men that is completely mentorship based. And what you're talking about, Craig, sounds to me very much like the true definition of what a mentor is. It's somebody who is providing the structure, providing in a sense, the safety that comes with that kind of structure about how to learn to drive the car, right? Or how to learn to wrestle, or how to learn to, play rugby. And it's giving them, though, the freedom, the boys, the young men, to engage in a way that is relational. You mentioned, just as an aside, actually earlier, about the spatial perceptual, kind of innate skills that boys have. They just studies have confirmed that men or males have a stronger sense of spatial perception. Yeah. And that goes with their whole visual, and that goes with the whole kind of looking at the field, and all of that. So, but the mentor relationship, and boys are relational beings, and that's what we focus on with Reach Academy. It certainly sounds a lot in line with what you've been doing with Father Nation as well, because it's capitalizing on what you've whittled down into 6 different strengths, this 6-pack of strengths and skills that really every young man should identify and capitalize on. Maybe actually now is a great time for you to at least be able to list those 6 and then share. We'll have a Chiron here about your website and all, but to share kind of how we can access them.
Sure. Well, I mean, let me just list them very quickly. I mean, it's a weekend seminar if you go in detail, but the first one is that men have strength. Physically, we have strength. Verbally, we've got strength. Emotionally, I mean, there are many different kinds of strength a man has. And what the number one quality of a good man is what does he do with his strength? It's not how much strength he has, it's what he does with it. And there are 3 things you can do. You can fail to use your strength. The old quote, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to be silent. And it's so true, or he can misuse his strength, so the one is passive, the one is aggressive. Someone said it beautifully once. He said the opposite of masculinity is not femininity, it's passivity. We're not designed to be passive as men. So you can fail to use your strength, you can misuse your strength, or you can use it for good. Strength is there is a sacred trust. I'm going to use it to love, to serve, honor, protect, provide. That's what we do. Number one quality. What do you do with your strength? Second quality is you tend your fields. Every man has a field. In that field is himself, his loved ones, his roles and responsibilities, his material possessions. And a good man says, I'm going to make sure everything in my field is well cared for, nurtured, looked after, tended to. The third one is how you value and judge yourself. True masculinity judges itself not by its possessions or image or externalities. It judges itself by its character. So it's not the size of your bank balance; it's the size of your heart. And there it goes to a lot of the wrong definitions of masculinity. I talk about the 4 big lies: sex, power, money, and big boys don't cry. And that, I mean, working with boys, that's what we grew up with. The more stick woman I can have, the more of a man I am. The more power, the more money, and by the way, big boys don't cry. And that's the destructive messages we receive growing up as boys. But it doesn't talk about, are you a man of your word? Do you have a set of values that you align to? Do you give more than you take? I mean, so you judge yourself by your character and not by your possessions or image. That's the third one. The fourth one is he builds a band of brothers. And it's so crucial. I mean, just coming online with you now, I feel a sense of brotherhood. It's wonderful, like-mindedness, you want to go to war together, you want to do, and we are in many ways. But men tend to be lonely. The research is very clear. A lot of men are lonely. They have a friend they can drink a beer with and watch a game of sport with. But in terms of really connecting deeply, vulnerably, sharpening each other, holding each other accountable, being that support, the kind of, the band of brothers that goes to war together. We've lost that connection often. So we cannot be our best as men alone. We need a band of brothers around us to do that. And so that's the fourth quality. You build a band of brothers. The fifth quality is you mentor the next generation. Every young boys look to older men to teach them how to be a man. And most of my mentors, or many of them, I've never met. They've been books that I've read and lives that I've followed. but we all need mentors, and we all need to mentor. It's crucial. I can tell amazing stories, I'm sure you can too, about the power of that, and when it's not in place, how boys just are destroyed through lack of masculine role modeling and mentoring. And the final quality, Nat, is the final point in the six pack is he makes the world a better place. And I love that one. We're designed to make the world a better place. And someone said so truthfully, you can often tell the character of a man by looking at his wife. Is she nurtured? Is she flourishing? Is she thriving? Is she the best she can be? Because that's the role of a man. And is your country a better place because you're a citizen of it? Is your workplace better? Are your colleagues better because are your kids? So are you making the world a better place? Are you a giver or are you a taker? As men, we're designed to be net givers, and you can't outgive God in the universe, can you? The more you give and create, and the more that comes back to you. But the point is, are you making the world a better place? So in a nutshell, that's the six pack.
Wow, that is just awesome. That is so inspiring. It's inspiring because so much of what goes into these six elements is future oriented, and it's looking beyond yourself and looking at your role within the fabric of the community. And I just love that. And that is something that, sounds to me that every young man would be very well helped, well assisted by having this reminder that he is one of, one patch in the whole quilt of society here, and the ripple effect of how you are, not even what you do, but who you are, has a massive impact on others. And we need this today. I'm also thinking about range, the word range, and how one man's range can just be so broad. And I'm also thinking about range in terms of one's own male identity. And maybe we can wrap up this conversation, unfortunately, way too quick. I can't believe how fast this half an hour has gone by. Very, very, very good sign about the depth of our conversation here, Craig. And I'm thinking about to maybe end on this idea of like what the range is of one's sense of masculinity, and what the range is of a masculine self. And because I think that part of this idea of toxic masculinity is this lumping all men together as this type of a person, and yet that's not the case. And maybe there's some lesson you can leave us with regarding the definition of masculinity today, and how important that idea of range is.
That's a great question, Nat. I mean, I think really one needs to conclude a conversation like this by just giving the message to men that you are enough. I think the biggest wound on a man's heart is, I'm not enough. I don't have what it takes. And that's a wound that men grow up. And a lot of bad masculine behavior comes from that, the need to prove, the sense that I'm not enough. And you either withdraw or you overcompensate. And that's absolutely crucial. However tall you are, whatever ethnicity you are, whatever, whoever you are, whatever you are, is enough to be valuable and have a huge impact on the world. And you need to be that. But that range is important. And I think men are confused at the moment. Boys are growing up confused. And the need for the kind of work you do is so crucial, because it's helping boys to weather the confusion and stop being on the back foot and be everything they were made to be. And the range is this, on the one hand, the world has typecast men as these Neanderthal, knuckle-dragging, toxic, abusive, macho. The one hand's the macho. On the other hand, what the world is feeding men is be more feminine, be a woman. Don't be a man, be a woman. Be soft and sensitive, be the nice guy. True masculinity is somewhere in between the two. There are times to be the nice guy, but there's times also to be the strong guy. And that's why I said those archetypes. So the range is, from king and warrior to lover and friend, from being standing up and taking full responsibility and not being afraid to lead and make decisions and be strong and be real, but also not being afraid to cry, to be vulnerable, to say, I'm really struggling right now, and that I'm battling, I'm in a tough place, to be able to do that and be able to listen to others to do it. And that's the range. And I think that's the range every man needs to have, because you're dangerous. You're dangerous to the danger. You're not dangerous to them. You're dangerous to corruption, to racism, to sexism, to gender. You're dangerous to that, to the evil. And people are safe in your presence, but you're also able to be vulnerable. It's the warrior poet. And I think that's the range we all need to aim at. But wherever we fit in that range, some guys are more soft, caring, loving, sensitive. That's absolutely beautiful. Some guys tend to be more the Marine types, and that's also fantastic. But the Marine needs to have the ability to be sensitive, and the sensitive guy needs to have the ability to step up and be a Marine when it's needed of him. Anyway,
That is so well put. That's such a great way to wrap this up, because by saying the Marine must be the sensitive and the sensitive person must be like the Marine, it's that range of who we are. And we're such complex individuals, whether you're a man or a woman or whatnot. We are, as human beings, getting back to your original statement earlier, Craig, at the beginning of this conversation, focusing on the human of us all and how that, is something we all have in common. But the complexity of our individual humanity is just infinite. And this idea of being able to expand in that range gives us both freedom, but also a lot of responsibility that comes with that as well. It's right. The word you haven't said, which is funny because this word is so overused in today's, at least in America, is authenticity. And yet that is what you're talking about. It's to really fully embrace your authentic self and in all the wide range that it is.
Very much so.
Yeah. I've learned a lot today, Craig, and I'm so grateful for the time that you've taken from 8,000 miles away and the separate hemisphere and evening over there, morning over here. But I've had my morning coffee and I've been enjoying it very, very much as I've been waking up to this conversation.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Tremendous, Nat. Lovely chatting to you, and keep up the fantastic work you're doing.
Please, you do as well. And thanks again for your time. And we're all beneficiaries of your wisdom and everything that you've done to really focus on this incredible need for to spotlight and strengthen and embolden, and also to invert this notion of toxic masculinity and really instead really work from within to celebrate and I would say honor what it is to be a man today. So thank you.
Absolutely. We need to do that.
Cheers.
You've been listening to Reach, Teach, Talk with Nat Damon. If you'd like to recommend a guest for a future episode, you can send your suggestion or questions to nat@reachacademics.com.